Designers and Builders, where design meets construction. We explore groundbreaking trends and talk to the pros reshaping our spaces. For your dream home, workspace, or just great design inspiration, subscribe to Designers and Builders.
Hey, welcome to today's brand new episode of Designers and Builders. I'm your host, Alyssa Olson. Today, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Drew Lang. How are you doing today, Drew?
Doing great. Thank you, Alyssa. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Lovely to have you with us. Appreciate it. And I also have to say, I know we were just catching up a bit, but I probably would need at least a week to explore the vast amount of content and offerings that you have to provide to architects and other collaborators. You do furniture, you wear many hats. So really excited to chat with you today. And let's dive in. Let's start with your backstory and see how far we can get into the present day.
Sure. Where would you like me to start?
So I think maybe what brought you into the field of architecture as a starting point, kind of your background, maybe a little bit of education, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief rundown of the early background, and I'll tell you what led me into architecture. I grew up in New Orleans. When I finished high school, I went to the East Coast and did a liberal arts degree. I studied literature at Middlebury College in Vermont. And I then took 3 years out between college and architecture school to explore architecture and confirm that that's what I wanted to pursue. I had an inkling it's what I wanted to pursue. And it's because I had a longstanding interest in both business and design, and just the visual world in general. And I saw architecture as a great way to marry those two interests. And the deeper I got into architecture, the more and more that was confirmed for me. And so it pretty quickly became evident that, yeah, this is something I find myself getting more and more passionate about, deeper and deeper into. I mean, and sure enough, I'm 30 years into the profession, roughly. There's no end. It goes broad and it goes deep, and there's really no end to it, and that's wonderful. I mean, I was talking with a good friend of mine who I grew up with in New Orleans just yesterday on the phone, and we were talking about the last chapters for our parents. Both have aging parents, and then as that's happening, of course, you reflect on what your final chapters might be. And he's an attorney, and he loves what he does, but he just can't see himself growing old in his profession. And I can't see myself not doing that. I mean, I have a lot of interests. Find they just continue going broader and deeper. When I finished architecture school, I went to Yale. And after that, I came to New York City. I worked for a professor of mine for 5 years and did that initial professional training. That was, took me through 2000, 9/11 and all that craziness in New York. I was in Lower Manhattan for all of that and really lived it. And then I started my own studio. When I started my own studio, I launched both my real estate development efforts and my architectural design consulting efforts. So I launched my studio with one client commission project. It was a loft in New York City, gut renovation of a 4,000 square foot loft. It was a great project to launch with. And I launched with a development project in New Orleans. My initial real estate development work was all in New Orleans. I did about 15 small development projects in New Orleans where, together with my mother, I bought small properties, renovated them, and sold them. And sometimes it was quite small, the scope, and other times it was architecturally significant with some out of the ground building. And the one that I ended up liking the most was one where we built a modern addition to a historic shotgun house in a residential neighborhood in New Orleans. And, it ended up being what I thought of as a double shotgun house with a glass bridge connecting them. So that was kind of the tail end of my development work. in New Orleans, and things have evolved from there.
Hmm. And did your mom have a background in real estate, or how did you start to collaborate with her on that?
Yeah, my mom was always a visual person. She always made things. She had for years and years a no, what to call it other than an independent makers practice. She would collect antique quilts and lace in Maine, where our family spent summers. She would then take these antique quilts and lace and make pillows, stockings, telephone book covers. I mean, these are the days when telephone books existed. I remember these telephone book covers that she made for people, right? So that you didn't have to actually look at the yellow pages and white pages. You could just kind of look at this kind of handcrafted, um, textile, that covered it. I mean, she made all sorts of things. There was a big write up on her in House and Garden magazine when it was around. And, I still have that. I still look at it, with some frequency, like every few months. I love looking at it for some reason. So, yeah, I mean, her eye, her creativity. My aunt, my grandmother, my father's side of my family were both similar in this way. They were both artistic. They were aesthetic people. They were the ones who introduced me and to kind of looking at things with interest and with a critical eye. And they loved it. And by extension, I loved it. And so it wasn't so much that my mom was into real estate or design. It just kind of evolved for her in some ways in parallel to my interests. I could kind of share my interests with her and vice versa.
Ah, for sure. So you kind of transitioned from the real estate focus in New Orleans. Was it directly to New York from there then? More of your project
Well, I
focus?
was I was based in New York, and I had this kind of satellite office and set of projects in New Orleans. And as it evolved, I did some client commission work in New Orleans, and client commission work in the New York area. And over the years, it's evolved. It's kind of extended beyond the South, kind of throughout the Southeast. We've had projects, and then when New York extended all over this region and beyond. So yeah, I still think of our work as embracing and combining both architecture that's client commission work and real estate development work that's self-generated.
So is that I was looking at your some of your projects in Hudson Valley, some of the homes there. Is that one of those combinations for you?
Yeah, the big project that we initiated and completed as a development project is called Hudson Woods. It's 130 acres in the Catskills, and we developed 26 home sites there. So, excuse me, hmm, I'm in the process and have for years been working with clients, helping them imagine what they can do with their land and execute on that. In some cases, owners come to us and we help them develop land. And I'm currently in the process of sourcing our next development deals.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Yeah, I know you have a very strong connection between nature and architecture and merging those and how they enhance one another. I'm curious just your collaborative opportunities in that. Like are you working on the site work and the architecture? Or are you reaching out to people? How do you approach the larger scale?
It's both. Our studio, as we've evolved, we really have developed a niche of working on architecture and nature, or architecture and landscapes. And so over the years, we've developed an interest, sensitivity, a skill set along those lines. That said, we're not landscape architects. We don't have landscape architects on our team. We will tend to do our project site planning, building, siting, some visioning as it pertains to the landscape. But we like to bring in partners, collaborators to work with us, ideally on projects. Everyone from foresters to civil engineers to landscape architects, wetland specialists, sometimes others. So yeah, we collaborate with a lot of people on our projects and really appreciate the work, especially of landscape architects.
For sure. Well, love that. We always love working with great designers. And I'm also curious to your clients. Is it more Do you have a lot of kind of recurring clients or more people reaching out to you? Just like how are these opportunities coming to you?
Yeah. It's interesting. Over the years, it's evolved. And it used to be when I first started that everything would come from my network, referrals within my network. My network grew to include clients, and sometimes clients will come back and hire us for other projects. But most of our work is residential, and there aren't many of our clients who are doing multiple homes. It does happen, but that's not the norm. There are two things that have evolved differently, I would say, in the last 10 years that's different than the way it worked in the beginning of my career, which is that our development work, specifically Hudson Woods, was very generative for us. So because it was a large project that lasted was active for about 5 years. It received a lot of attention from the consumer public. A lot of people were just interested in it. They were either curious about it and they came to see it, or they followed us on Instagram or with our newsletter, or, they came because they were interested buyers. And so there's a large group that evolved out of that. And it was also aided by a lot of media coverage that we received from the project. So not only was the project fulfilling and successful on many levels, it was generative. It was very, very generative. It's more than anything else what's brought us new work. I always talk to my colleagues in our industry about this, and I encourage people, very strongly encourage people, start your own projects, generate your own work, and that will then beget other work. It's just the way things work. I mean, I've seen it play out. And, now with the internet being what it is, more and more people are just able to find us. That's the other dynamic that takes hold. So Instagram is extremely powerful, needless to say, in that regard, and just the web and search. And people are looking for houses in nature, or whatever it is that they're looking for. I have no idea what people are looking for. They just find us. So and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's that level of visibility and connectedness and people finding the things that they truly want, right? Which also for you is the project typologies. Yeah. So speaking of community building, I'd love to talk about your brick and wonder community. I know
Hmm.
it's something, it's a membership collective. It's all about collaboration. There's a podcast component, there's workshops, there's roundtables. Can you just tell us kind of how that came to be and a little more about it?
Yeah, happy to. Happy to. It actually grew out of my experience with the Hudson Woods project. What happened in that project that was very, very different than any work experience I had had previously is that I was able to curate, I was able to handpick a group of collaborators that extended the full spectrum of the built environment. So what I mean by that is we sourced and acquired the land. We did all the legal and financial work associated with starting up the project. We did a lot of complex land planning. Fast forward, working through all the architecture and construction, which we also led with a big team that we handpicked and hired. And um, we ended up handling all the marketing and the sales, and we had branding specialists we work with. We had marketing specialists that we work with, but everything was vertically integrated. And by the nature of that, what happened is I saw a very, very positive collaboration dynamic take hold, take root, where this group of people, we were inclined to continue working with each other beyond that project. We worked together on other projects as we were working on this project. And it all just, these relationships, these collaborative relationships began to take on a life of their own. And I that was so meaningful to me and so differentiated from my past experience, which was relationships that were really transactional more than anything else. That's the way that I saw people coming together and myself coming together with people, where it was very, very hard to align interests,
Yeah.
um, and, and very painful to go through the process of executing projects. Especially when projects went from design into construction. There's the shift that often takes place where um, there's a there's a handover from the design team, the larger design team, to the larger construction team. And even though you're ostensibly working together, you're also working in a sense at odds with one another. And that's inherently problematic. I mean, it's painful to experience, doesn't lead to great outcomes. And so, because I had a positive set of experiences, I wanted to, in a sense, formalize that. I wanted to continue with this process of developing more and more meaningful relationships, collaborative relationships across the industry. And I had the sense that a lot of other people had these same problems that I had, wanted a better professional life and outcomes for themselves. And sure enough, it turns out to be true. Fast forward 6 years later, we're 6 years into the formation of the Brick and Wonder community. We have nearly 400 members globally, and most of those members are in New York. We started in New York. We now have active programming in San Francisco and London.
Mm.
There are burgeoning communities in many other locations where Brick and Wonder members are based, and we're frequently asked to bring programming to those locations as well. We're a small team. The Brick and Wonder team is 4 people right now. We'll grow, but we are very deliberately growing slowly. For us, the priority is quality and integrity, high quality people and high quality work. Most Brick and Wonder members have 10 years of experience in their profession or more. They're all in a position to bring significant value to their fellow members. And, that's what being part of the community is about. It's about coming together with people, learning from one another, building each other up, propping each other up, coming together and collaborating on projects. That's the ultimate goal. Referring projects to one another, that's just naturally what happens as a matter of course in our industry. There's some professionals who are more generative, more at the top of the food chain, if you will, than others. And so, you could say they're more coveted, more valuable members of the community, except what ends up happening is the community ends up being this great equalizer. And, you know, strange things happen, unexpected things happen, and that's by design. We just kind of set the community up, establish the values that we've established, which are really quite simple. The values are about openness, extending value to others, having a mindset of abundance, and, interacting with people along those lines. For us, the relationships begin with the people. It is a relational community, and we explicitly discourage transactional dialogue when people are first coming together with one another.
Right.
The conversation's naturally going to lead to that. I mean, everyone's in business. Everyone needs new business. Everybody knows that about one another. And so if people begin to sell to one another, that's not a good dynamic. Part of our job is to look out for that and to, in a sense, root it out. And at the same time, to encourage people collaborating with each other on projects. It's a fine line, as you can imagine. And it's interesting, right? Because there are actually quite a few salespeople in the community. For instance, product companies, an appliance company, you have a stone and tile company, you have a wood flooring company. These are product companies that are selling their goods to others in the industry. It's generally the specifiers they're selling to, interior designers, architects, landscape architects, developers, builders too. But it needs to begin not with the sale, but the relationship. And that's the way it works.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you've just completely flipped the script, right? It's not just, oh, I need an architect for a thing, and then you just hire someone. It's finding the right person and that right connection. Someone, we spend so much of our time and so many years doing these projects, it might as well be really good collaborations to offer the most amount of value, right? And have the best end product at the end of the day. So I think that's really, really inspiring. And I think it's so cool that you built a community around it. It's so much larger than just one person, right? Like you're not just that kind of sole architect. Like I feel like a lot of people have that vision of like, oh, there's this singular person, but you've built this global community, which is super cool. And I also noticed on like your podcast, for example, it's always the format is multiple people, right? So you're already talking about collaboration, right? That's kind of the foundation of all these conversations.
That's the key word for us, collaboration. If over the years what we're doing really takes hold, um, that word will continue to kind of ripple across the community. And I hope we, in some sense, redefine collaboration. Collaboration is, I think, for a lot of people, a throwaway term. People use the term, it has some meaning, but I think that what we're trying to do is take it deeper and broader to a place where it really means something, where there's a dynamic of alignment between people who are working together, and an alignment that continues not just over the course of a single project, but continues over years and decades. So that's why I felt like when I started Brick and Wonder, it was really, really important to formalize this. It's not enough to collaborate with someone on a single project and then go away respectively to your own lives, to your own offices, to your own silo, right? People are siloed. People by their nature of the way they operate are siloed from one another unless and until they come together and transact. It's just the way it works. Unless it doesn't. And so we're saying, no, let's come together consistently over time. Let's have one another in mind always. Let's be available to one another as resources. Let's not be in a position where we have to reinvent the wheel every step of the way.
Mhm.
So we have a community forum, a private online forum where all the members are. Anyone can go in there at any given time, and in the communication feed, just type in a question, a query. What our team does is look out for that every day, and they'll take that question and they'll tag people in the community who we think are in a good position to answer that question. Everybody's really, really busy. People don't have the app or the website open at all times looking out for questions that people are asking. And so, we have a team, and two of the team members, their primary job is to just be in touch with the community members at all times, have a finger on the pulse with respect to the community members, and connect them deliberately with each other around their common interests. And so it's a curated kind of hand selected community of people that's assisted not just member to member, but also by our team, by the Brick and Wonder team. And, our hope over time is that our team becomes less and less important, and the members are more and more in a position where they can and do just come together and prop one another up. I think, you said something, Alyssa, about my flipping the dynamic on its head, which is exactly right. People's old habits are ingrained. People um, are programmed to do things a certain way, and I think just tend to fall back into their silos and isolate themselves and are heads down. We're encouraging a different mode of being, professionally, and we're setting up more and more ways, more and more touch points for people to stay consistently connected over time. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're building a CRM, and we don't know yet what we're going to call it. The placeholder name is just Connect. There won't be the name that sticks, but this will be launched in sometime in 2026, available to anybody within our industry and beyond, but it's specifically built for the owners and the senior managers inside of companies within the built environment to stay connected and collaborate with one another while building their business pipelines. And it's our view that the most powerful tool for people to use to do that is their community, their network, their most important contacts within the industry and beyond. The CRM is built in a way where you can put any contact into the CRM and deliberately stay connected with them. I think over time, the most important collaborators we have are within our profession because, is a client important? Of course, they're critically important, but clients will do a project with you and then they will go away. Maybe they come back some years later and hire you again, but you will ideally work with your most important collaborators consistently for years, decades, time and time and time and time again, project by project by project. And so it's encouraging alignment, encouraging people to be accountable to one another, encouraging communication and connectivity, encouraging people referring work to one another, encouraging all sorts of behaviors that people want and need to see. And, the more of this happens, the better. And ultimately, the idea is for this to become a flywheel for everybody. So we're not in a position where we're operating in a hand to mouth manner, wondering how we're going to make payroll in 2 weeks or in 3 months. Generally speaking, in our industry, people's pipelines, active pipelines extend uh, and not beyond that. And we know this. We've talked to a lot of people across the industry. For some people, it's a little different. Some people it's less than that. Some people it's more. But for most people, it's in that 3 to 6 months range. That is not a comfortable place to be for anybody. It's very, 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 very uncomfortable, right? So, and it's a long-term proposition, but we're setting out to solve that.
Absolutely. And would you say that do you think that's the number one thing that you find that's missing right now is kind of that larger level of connecting?
I don't know. I mean, I would say yes. It, it I think, more specifically, um, it's a mindset really that's missing or um you know misshapen or ill-formed or however you want to put it. I think if people can just change their frame of mind about these things a little bit, take a posture of giving rather than taking. I mean, ideally it's give and take, right? And there's this balance that takes form, that takes hold. But oftentimes, in fact, most of the time it's out of balance, right? Like, and the best condition for people to operate in is in a place where they've given far, far more than they've received. And our view is that if people are doing that consistently over years, the rest will take care of itself. In other words, good things will come back to you. People are reciprocal. Most people, I would say all people, because Brick and Wonder is not for all people. It is for people who want to embrace this mode of behavior and this mindset. For those people, it is reciprocal. If you are given value by others, you're going to find ways of extending value to those people, of giving back to them. You just are. It's just the way it works, and we see it all the time. So, it's there are social scientists out there who have studied this. I'm not one of them. The most notable one is a guy named Adam Grant. He has a book called Give and Take. And in the book, there are stories told and studies that are cited that demonstrate these things for people who need to, read those sorts of studies and be convinced. But, it's better to just live it yourself and experience it yourself.
For sure. Yeah, Adam Grant is all over my LinkedIn feed. He's such an inspiration And just the way he also, similar to you in your work, just keeps evolving, keeps that forward motion, keeps pushing just his like own boundaries of learning what's out there and what can be out there in the world. And for you, it's clear that it's collaboration, but at this much larger scale to create the really meaningful impact in the world and high value. And I think what's also interesting is that in working with others, it also brings out your own value. Like I'll speak for myself, but it's like I sometimes find it hard to be like, well, like what is my value? I don't know, but when you work with other people and see theirs, sometimes they'll shine light on yours, and it's really just kind of expanding your own capacity and understanding of what's possible. And I think that's a really powerful part of the brick and wonder that you've been developing.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah,
just one more thing on that, Alyssa. I think that's exactly right. If this works the way it's supposed to, and you're finding, your people, your collaborators, people who are really good at what they do, who work alongside you, they make you better at what you do. And they make you shine. So I think you're absolutely right in that regard. So, and look, it needless to say, if you're not succeeding, if you're not shining, it's not working, right? Like, and with with that said, it takes time. It doesn't happen um, for most people in short order. It takes time. It takes years. So, yeah.
yeah. And I've also always, in my design training, been conditioned to understand that, a lot of designers mature much later in life, right? It takes decades. It's a design practice. We're practicing all the time. And the only way to get better at something is to keep practicing it. So I think
It's,
that's a big component too, is just the time.
yeah, it's a great point. I fully agree.
Yeah, and then I was also curious, just in our chatting ahead of this, if you are up for it, to touch on your vision for your kind of next season of your podcast and your format. I found that really compelling, just the way that you were setting it up.
We um we always have two guests on our podcast. And I was telling you, we've evolved to a place where we now have two hosts. I have a co-host who is a guy named Ravi Arps, who is a builder, who's part of the Brick and Wonder community, who I met um in the Brick and Wonder community. I've
Yeah.
collaborated with him on many projects, and there will be many more we collaborate on. We've formed some businesses together. He and I are doing a lot with one another, and we're tag teaming now on hosting the Brick and Wonder podcast. Um, it's about talking with people who have, in the first two seasons, collaborated with each other on projects. And diving into their stories of collaboration. As we're looking forward to the third season, we're gonna do things a little bit differently. We're gonna shake things up a little bit and start to bring in people outside of the built environment, bearing in mind that there are interesting and important things for us to learn from others. So, for instance, one of the podcast episodes that we're in the process of setting up now is with a guy who's in the brick and mortar community, who is a real estate developer and writer and speaker, very outspoken guy about our industry, both its strengths and its shortcomings. And we're going to identify someone in the world of fashion to come and be in that conversation with us. It's going to be someone in their own right who has a voice in the world of fashion, is an advocate for the world of fashion, and maybe has a view on its strengths and shortcomings. And, we're going to, in these sorts of conversations, hopefully be able to uncover some things that we don't yet know. And people in our community and beyond don't yet know and can learn from. And ultimately, we're trying to help people, as I was telling you, push boundaries, break boundaries, um, you know, get to a place where they have these kind of breakout moments and, breakout careers. This is what I aspire to. And it's what everybody in the brick and wonder community aspires to. I think it's what most people aspire to. Someone who's ambitious, someone who's aspirational. This is the mode that they want to operate in, and so that's the audience that we're trying to speak to in our podcast.
I love that. And same here. There's so many different modes for operating in your professional life. And I feel like Brick and Wonder is an excellent example and opportunity, not only for collaboration, but also for really pushing these boundaries in our profession. And in all of these, within the industry, all the professions within it, to enhance the whole and really put the value of design out there in the world. Yeah, really cool. And I guess I feel like this entire discussion has highly educational. But I guess, are there any other takeaways or advice you might have for others or a younger version of yourself?
I'm going to repeat something I said earlier, which is that I encourage people. And by the way, I have to remind myself about this frequently. Generate your own projects. Don't place yourself in a position, as I have many times in the span of my career, where you're wholly reliant on your clients. Clients' lives evolve and their projects evolve, and sometimes they just stop. I mean, out of the middle of nowhere, or, things just dry up
Mm.
and the phone stops ringing. And, what I found is that by infusing our studio with projects that we generate ourselves, development projects, in our case, Brick and Wonder, in a sense, is in that vein as well. It's something that sits alongside of our studio. It's incubated inside of our architectural studio. You mentioned we design and sell furniture. It's something that we've done a bit. We hope to do a lot more of together with my partner who I mentioned earlier, Robbie Arbs. We're developing a series of products that can be brought into our projects that we use time and time and time again.
Mm.
Interior doors or something that we've designed and we're currently prototyping. The first application will be our own projects, but we may very well develop a product line. Again, it's about just taking hold of things, taking agency. And the alternative is just waiting for others to bring that to you. And I hear so many people express frustration. So many of my colleagues express frustration. And it's, I would say we're our own worst enemies. We all are. I mean, if anyone's to blame in this, it's us. I mean, like when I find myself in a hard spot, a down moment, where am I to look for this? I mean, we can talk about the macro economy and the crazy president we have now and how he's making our lives miserable. And sure, but do we want to stay in that spiral? Is there real fear out in the world? Is it paralyzing a lot of people? Yeah, but do you have to sit in a state of paralysis and, wait around for others to come to you? No, just go out and do things. Everybody's got ideas. The thing is, it takes initiative and it takes risk. And a lot of what we set the Brick and Wonder community up to do is to be a supportive network. Either 40 professional verticals. If someone doesn't know how to set up a contract, or an offering plan, like a legal document that is an offering plan where they can go out and raise capital, right? Some people say, well, what's keeping me from doing this thing that I want to do is capital. I have the capital. Well, you got to figure out how to put your own capital into something you're starting. It won't happen otherwise, at least some of it, like 5% of the capital that's required, the equity capital. But you can raise 95% of it from other people, and it's really, really hard to do, but anyone can do it if they set their mind to it, and if they have something really valuable to bring to the world.
Something I've recently been told, and I feel like you just embody this through and through, is if you want to change your life, you need to take actions to change your life. And I feel like that's exactly what you've done throughout your story is you have this insight, this idea, and you just do it. You go for it. And you've built these things so much larger than yourself, than all the people involved. And I'm just thoroughly impressed and like genuinely inspired. So I just appreciate your work in this world and, hope to collaborate with you myself. And I have so many more things like the furniture, the design stuff, all the people. Like we are all so connected, but I also know that when you find people that you're aligned with, that also kind of rises to the top in a lot of ways. So just genuinely thank you for being you and sharing all this with the community.
My pleasure, Alyssa. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on and appreciate your questions and the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, how can people best connect with you? How do they find you?
Brickandwonder.com if you want to learn more about Brick and Wonder, and you can link to the podcast there and listen to episodes. And Instagram, LinkedIn, all the channels we're on. Lang Architecture is our architecture studio.
Huh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, Alyssa. Bye bye now.
Take care.